The ocean can be breathtaking and deadly. From the terrifying live attack on Australian YouTuber Josh Taylor by a massive great white, to Jake Simmons's desperate fight for survival against a stalking tiger shark on a remote Western Australia beach. In this video, you'll watch 6 harrowing encounters that reveal the raw, unpredictable power of apex predators. Brace yourself as we dive into gripping stories where skill, courage, and sheer luck clash against nature's deadliest hunters. On September 13, 2025, the early morning sun rose over the popular surfing waters near New South Wales, casting warm gold across the peaceful ocean. 27-year-old Australian YouTuber Josh Taylor felt a familiar rush of excitement in his chest as he prepared to capture the most thrilling live stream of his channel so far. Convinced that pushing his limits would reward him with views, subscribers, and the feeling that he was still climbing toward success rather than fading into obscurity. Because in the competitive world of online content, he needed moments that stood out, moments people would never forget. Josh had always been drawn to the ocean, having grown up on beaches where surfing was a way of life. Though his channel had shifted toward extreme stunts and adventure challenges, the water remained the place where he felt strongest, most confident, and truly himself. That feeling fueled the rush of excitement pulsing through his veins as he secured his action camera, tightened his leash, and carried his board into the rolling surf, while thousands of viewers tuned in to watch his every move. The waves that morning were clean and powerful, rising in smooth walls of water that invited bold attempts from surfers who felt ready for a test, and Josh paddled beyond the break with strong, practiced strokes, glancing occasionally at the camera mounted to his board as the chat scrolled with cheering messages that he imagined were pushing him farther outward, into the deeper blue, where the thrill truly waited. He knew these waters held sharks because every surfer in Australia understood that the biggest predators on the planet frequently hunted along the coast. Yet he trusted his experience and statistics more than fear, believing that bad encounters were rare and that the odds of anything going wrong were too small to matter on a perfect day like this one, when the calm sea and beautiful weather made danger seem unreal. He sat straddling his board, breathing steadily as the swell lifted him and set him down again like the slow heartbeat of the ocean itself. And he thought about the stunt he planned to attempt once the stream hit the viewer count he wanted. Something new and dramatic that involved paddling farther offshore than most surfers dared, capturing a wide-angle shot of untouched water and letting the audience feel the isolation and thrill of pushing into the unknown, which he imagined could become the video that set his career on fire. His viewers grew rapidly, and the energy of that realization crackled through him stronger than caffeine, pulling his attention completely into the streaming world instead of the natural warnings he might have noticed if he had not been so focused on the numbers, the possibilities, and the thrill. Beneath him, the water darkened briefly as a massive shape glided silently below the surface, unseen by Josh and unnoticed by his viewers, because the morning light and the glittering waves hid the shifting shadow with deceptive ease. And the great white shark, estimated later at over 16 feet in length, moved with the effortless confidence of a predator at the top of the food chain, drawn toward the paddling figure above who disrupted the stillness with strong rhythmic movements that resembled a vulnerable marine animal. Josh shifted his weight, preparing for another wave, and the shark turned sharply upward, curious at first, but quickly transitioning into a full hunting drive as it sensed an opportunity for a swift, overwhelming strike, propelled by raw power from a body evolved for ambush in open water. Josh leaned forward, scanning the horizon for the next swell, unaware of the danger rising beneath him. And then the ocean erupted in a violent explosion of white foam and churning water as the shark surged upward with terrifying speed, jaws opening wide enough to engulf a large section of the surfboard, and the man who clung to it in shock and disbelief so sudden he never had time to think of escape. The impact catapulted him from the board, and the camera captured only a rapid blur of chaos before the live stream cut to shaking images of the sea's surface, leaving viewers horrified and confused as the feed fractured into silence. Underwater, Josh struggled instinctively, but the shark's bite locked around his thigh and lower torso with crushing force, dragging him downward into the cold darkness where light faded quickly, and the pressure of the ocean pressed in from all sides while adrenaline surged through his body, fighting against the inevitability of a creature far stronger and perfectly designed for this environment. He reached upward toward the vanishing surface as blood spread in drifting red clouds that signaled to the shark that the attack had succeeded, triggering a series of aggressive thrashes that prevented Josh from ever regaining control or reaching the surface again. Above, surfers and witnesses on nearby boats reacted with horror as they saw the violent splash and realized something unimaginably dangerous had just occurred, and they paddled desperately toward the area where Josh's board reappeared alone, drifting and spinning. The action camera still attached, but the live stream now frozen in a distorted frame that only deepened the panic of the people watching on shore and online. Search efforts launched within seconds, and rescue crews scoured the waters with boats and aircraft throughout the day. Yet, despite the urgency and determination, they found only pieces of the surfboard and scattered equipment, grim reminders of how quickly the ocean could take a life without giving anything back. As news spread across social media and television throughout Australia and beyond, the tragic event became a chilling reminder that the ocean was not a playground designed for human entertainment, but a vast wild world controlled by powerful forces and ancient predators that followed no rules except survival. Experts urged surfers, divers, and especially content creators not to underestimate the risks of pushing boundaries for attention or thrill. Authorities issued warnings and temporarily closed parts of the coastline, noting that great whites often followed migratory patterns along New South Wales. But the measures offered little comfort to those who had watched the live stream end in terror, or to Josh's family, who knew that he had always wanted to inspire and amaze people, yet never imagined his passion would lead him into the jaws of the most feared predator in the sea. On August 4, 2024, 30-year-old marine biologist Alex Ramirez stood aboard a sturdy diving boat drifting above the deep blue pulse of the Gulf Stream off the eastern coast of Florida, where warm currents flowed northward carrying life from the Caribbean into American waters, and where juvenile bull sharks often gathered to hunt and test their strength in the powerful drift that shaped their earliest survival instincts. Alex had spent years studying these predators, fascinated by their adaptability and aggression, earning respect from colleagues who admired his to stay calm in situations that would send less experienced divers scrambling back to safety. Alex believed that knowledge and awareness were the strongest tools that a person could bring into the territory of an apex predator. He led cage diving tours not only to secure funding for ongoing research, but also because he believed that seeing sharks up close could replace fear with understanding, helping people realize that these animals played a critical role in a healthy ocean and did not deserve the reputation of mindless killers. That morning began with smooth organization and a sense of routine confidence, the tourists eagerly listening as the crew prepared the heavy steel cage designed to withstand even powerful impacts from large sharks. While Alex checked his equipment carefully, tightening straps and testing airflow because he knew strong currents could turn a simple misstep into disaster faster than anyone expected. The wind was mild, and the sky was an endless sunlit blue. But beneath the surface, the Gulf Stream surged with unusual strength, creating swirling movement that shifted the boat's position and tugged against anything suspended in the water, including the bait line that trailed downward to attract the juvenile sharks gliding below. Alex descended into the water first, stepping into the cage with slow precision while the divers above lowered the bait bucket into the drifting current, and as he adjusted his footing, he felt the familiar excitement that always came from seeing the underwater world open around him, revealing fluid shadows and flashes of silver movement far beneath his fins. Bull sharks were notorious for their boldness, especially the younger ones that were still learning how to assert themselves in a competitive hunting environment. Alex watched their silhouettes approach with confident curiosity, their strong bodies cutting through the shifting blue as they investigated the scent trail that pulled them closer to the cage. The first few minutes passed with a calm predictability that reassured the tourists watching from above and through cameras attached to the cage bars. The sharks made wide passes that Alex recorded on his tablet, noting length, movement patterns, and the subtle dominance displays that involved sudden shifts of direction and quick bursts of speed. He felt completely in control, trusting the cage and his own understanding of what the sharks were likely to do, but beneath his feet, the currents twisted sharply, lifting the bait bucket higher than intended, its contents drifting in an irresistible trail that reached the largest shark first. From the deep blue darkness below, the 11-foot bull shark surged upward with explosive acceleration, its powerful head slamming into the lower bars of the cage in a violent crash that sent a deep vibration through Alex's bones and rattled loose particles of rust from the steel structure. And in that single second, the line between confident observation and primal terror vanished completely. The shark twisted aggressively, its thick body scraping along the cage as it searched for the source of the scent and movement, and the sudden impact knocked Alex off balance, causing him to shift his arm outward through a narrow gap between the bars, just as the shark's jaws opened wide, teeth gleaming with lethal precision. The bull shark clamped onto his right arm with a force that tore easily through neoprene and flesh, sending a shocking bolt of pain up to his shoulder as warm blood clouded the water around him in a spreading red haze that instantly heightened the shark's frenzy. Adrenaline flooded his body as he fought the instinct to thrash, knowing sudden erratic movement could trigger a more powerful attack. He braced his feet against the cage floor, pulling backward with every ounce of strength his panicked muscles could produce, while the shark jerked its massive head in violent, twisting motions designed to rip away whatever it held in its jaws. The tourists on the boat above reacted with horror as they saw the cage shake and the water turn darkened with red, and the crew scrambled to raise the cage as quickly as possible, shouting commands to coordinate movement while Alex's vision blurred with the rush of fear and the crushing pain of teeth grinding into muscle and bone. With a final desperate heave that strained every part of his body, he yanked his arm back far enough that the shark's teeth lost their full hold, ripping jagged flesh as it released him and turned away in a swift arc. Clouds of blood trailing in the streaming current as the predator circled again, testing whether the prey had truly escaped or whether another attack could be launched with equal success. Alex stumbled against the back of the cage, fighting to stay conscious as the world pulsed with the rhythm of his rapid heartbeat, and the cold weight of the ocean pressed against his body. He forced himself upright because he knew that sinking into panic would leave him helpless if the shark returned. The cage jerked upward as the crew hauled it toward the surface, while the bull shark glided below like a dark symbol of ancient power, unwilling to leave but temporarily confused by the sudden lack of motion from the figure that had bled so heavily only moments earlier. Strong hands reached for him as soon as the cage broke the surface, pulling him from the water while his injured arm dangled, leaving a trail of blood across the deck where he collapsed and tried to catch his breath before shock could claim him. The crew applied pressure to his mangled arm, working urgently to slow the bleeding while the boat raced toward shore. As pain washed over him in relentless waves, Alex realized that no level of experience or scientific knowledge could ever eliminate the raw unpredictability of nature, because sharks remained wild, powerful animals shaped by instincts that measured the world only in hunger and survival. The attack became a case study among researchers and divers, a reminder that working with apex predators required respect, not built from fear, but from the understanding that humans would always be the vulnerable ones in the vast, unforgiving world beneath the waves. On March 18, 2023, 26-year-old professional kiteboarder Emma Blake sliced through the rough, wind-whipped water off the remote coast of Western Australia, driven by the same craving for adrenaline that had shaped her life since childhood. Because speed, power, and the freedom of the open ocean gave her a sense of purpose that nothing else ever could. The towering gusts that rushed across the sea that day promised exactly the kind of performance she wanted to capture for her sponsors and her growing online following. The coastline stretched in a rugged line of dunes and pale sand far behind her, leaving her surrounded by the vast blue where the wind roared in her ears and the pull of the kite harness felt like flying just above the waves, while she threaded her board between rising swells with practiced, precise control that made the ocean feel almost tame beneath her feet. Her support team trailed at a distance aboard a safety boat, giving her the space she needed to attempt a new speed record she had trained months to achieve, and Emma focused only on the shifting rhythm of the wind and the rolling water, ignoring every distraction that might break her concentration, because she knew how quickly one mistake could send her crashing into the sea. The board skimmed faster and faster, hissing across the surface as the sun glared off the water in blinding flashes. She leaned back against the pull of the sail, with every muscle engaged, feeling powerful, untouchable, and completely alive in that remote stretch of ocean, where only a few people ventured with such intensity and ambition. Beneath her, the water churned into swirling turbulence from the speed of her movement, and the bright colors of her sail cast flickering shadows downward into the deep blue world, where large predators patrolled constantly in search of prey, and the chaotic noise of the board cutting through the water created vibrations that traveled far across the reef edges below, attracting the attention of a 14-foot tiger shark cruising through its territory. Tiger sharks were opportunistic hunters known to investigate anything that disrupted the water column, and the sudden flashes of color combined with the frantic pulses of pressure changes triggered their curiosity, pushing it upward through the shifting light toward the surface, where Emma raced unknowingly above the dark shape rising faster than she could react. The ocean exploded without warning as the massive shark surged upward from below, its blunt head smashing into the underside of the board with brutal force that snapped the rhythm of Emma's smooth run in a single violent instant. sending her airborne and tearing the harness line as the board twisted away beneath the impact, leaving her suspended for a brief heart-stopping moment before she slammed into the cold water with a stunned gasp. Disoriented and tangled in the dragging lines of her gear as the kite pulled unpredictably in the gusting wind above, she kicked desperately, trying to break free and reach the surface, while the water churned around her in a confusion of bubbles and shifting light that turned the world into a spinning blur of fear and disbelief. The tiger shark circled back with predatory confidence, drawn now not only by curiosity, but by the scent of scraped fiberglass and the electric panic that pulsed through the water as Emma struggled. Its powerful body sliced through the deep like a living torpedo, closing the distance in seconds while Emma fought to free her trapped leg from the harness. She managed to break the surface for a breath, just as the shark struck again, its jaws clamping around her lower leg with a crushing force that sent a blinding shock of pain shooting upward through her body, and she was yanked downward, dragged into the shadowed depths as the water darkened around her with a spreading cloud of red that drifted outward in slow, ominous tendrils. The sudden pull of the kite line kept her from being dragged completely under, as the shark's attack lacked the full momentum needed for a fatal bite-and-shake motion, causing the harness to jerk violently and yank her back up toward the surface as the shark released and circled, preparing to strike again if she showed continued signs of struggle. Her heart hammered painfully while she fought the instinct to thrash, and she kicked upward with her remaining strength, lungs burning as she managed to reach the air again, coughing and gasping as the wind whipped water across her face, and the kite continued to drag her helplessly across the surface, turning every small wave into another obstacle for a body that was rapidly losing blood and energy. Her support team saw the horrific scene unfold from the boat and accelerated toward her, their wake cutting through the water as panic and urgency took over. But the distance on the ocean felt impossibly fragile, and Emma's condition grew worse with every second that passed, her blood painting the sea in a trail that only increased the shark's agitation. The predator made another slow, circling pass, deciding whether to attack again or retreat in search of a meal that would require less effort, and for a moment it lingered below her, watching the drifting figure that moved weaker with each tug of the wind, while Emma's vision dimmed around the edges as shock began to take hold of her injured body. When the rescue boat finally reached her, crew members hauled her aboard with frantic, trembling hands as the deck darkened with the deep crimson of her blood. They worked desperately to keep her conscious, pressing against the wound, but it was catastrophic. The ocean had already taken too much. The boat tore toward shore, engines screaming against the waves, while Emma drifted in and out of awareness, her eyes fixed on the wind-swept sky she had loved so fiercely. By the time they reached help, the blood loss and internal damage had already carried her beyond saving. Emma's final run became a case study in the unpredictable nature of tiger sharks and the importance of cautious boundaries in environments where human thrill and wild instinct collided, leaving behind a legacy that shaped new discussions about safety, respect, and the ever-present reality of the ocean's untamed predators. In October 2025, recreational sailor David Harper guided his 38-foot yacht along the calm California coast, hoping to give his wife and 2 children a peaceful weekend away from the noise of daily life. The bright sky reflected on the slow-moving waves as the family enjoyed the warm breeze, while the wind filled the sails and pushed the vessel steadily forward into deeper water. The ocean felt calm and safe, with no signs of danger anywhere in sight, and David trusted his years of sailing experience to keep his family secure, as the coastline slowly shrank behind them. As the afternoon sun lowered, they entered a stretch of ocean known for orcapods that sometimes passed through. And although David had heard stories of boaters spotting these impressive predators, he believed the animals usually kept their distance and continued hunting fish or seals far from human vessels, so he felt no reason to worry. The kids pointed toward the horizon, hoping to see one of the massive black fins cutting through the surface. And David smiled as he watched their excitement, unaware that the peaceful atmosphere around them would soon change into something terrifying. A dark shape appeared beneath the water, its size difficult to grasp at first, but the tall dorsal fin that sliced upward like a blade revealed the presence of a large male orca, and the sudden appearance made David's nerves tighten, because he knew that a 25-foot apex predator circling a yacht should never be ignored. The orca moved with controlled precision, just below the waves as if studying the boat, and David kept a firm grip on the wheel as he felt the atmosphere shift from peaceful curiosity to cold unease. The orca accelerated without warning, driving its massive head into the hull with a powerful strike that echoed through the yacht like a thunderclap, and the entire vessel jolted sideways, sending loose gear sliding and the children stumbling before they clung desperately to the nearest rail. David's heart hammered as he tried to stabilize the yacht, but the shock of the attack stunned him because he had never imagined that a wild orca would deliberately ram his boat with such force. Then the animal returned again, circling like a hunter testing its prey, and David shouted for his wife and children to hold tight as another impact crashed against the fiberglass, leaving a deep dent that threatened the structural integrity of the hull. The strength behind each strike felt personal, almost like a warning, and David struggled to ignore the fear rising in his chest while he scanned the water for the next attack, hoping the animal would lose interest and move on. For a few seconds, the orca vanished, leaving only ripples and silence, but the tension grew unbearable because the family knew the predator remained close, and the children trembled as the ocean felt like a trap they could not escape. David's wife squeezed the kids close while trying to hide her panic, but none of them could look away from the dark water surrounding the boat, waiting for the beast to return. When the orca emerged again, it struck harder than before, lifting part of the yacht's hull above the surface for a brief moment as fiberglass cracked under the immense pressure, and a sharp tearing sound warned David that one more hit like that could open the hull and flood the lower compartments. He fought to maintain control of the wheel as the yacht rocked dangerously on the churning waves caused by the assault, and the spray of salt water hitting his face reminded him how fragile their situation truly was. The orca then swam along the vessel's length, its eye above the surface for a moment, as if observing the people aboard, and that short, chilling glimpse made David feel small and powerless because the intelligence behind that gaze was undeniable. The animal seemed to understand exactly how to cause maximum fear, moving with a calculated purpose that made every second on the water feel like it could be their last. David attempted evasive maneuvers, turning sharply to create distance, but the orca pursued with ease, gliding through the water with an effortless dominance that mocked any attempt to outrun it. Another heavy strike shook the yacht, and cabinet doors below deck slammed open as objects clattered across the floor, while the structure groaned like it could split apart at any moment. The attack dragged on as the massive predator continued its violent game, and David felt a sense of helpless dread because there was nothing he could do but hope the creature stopped before the damage became fatal. Every heartbeat stretched into an eternity as the family clung to whatever they could grasp, feeling the raw power of nature showing them how quickly control could disappear when the ocean decided to change its mood. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes of relentless aggression, the orca disengaged, gliding away into the deeper water with slow, confident movements as though satisfied with the chaos it had created. The sudden, peaceful silence felt almost unreal after the terrifying impacts that had shaken the vessel repeatedly. David kept his eyes fixed on the ocean, terrified the animal might return, but the dark shape drifted farther until it vanished completely beneath the waves, leaving only ripples fading in the expanding distance. No one aboard was physically injured, but the shock left the family trembling as they examined the cracked hull and the deep dents carved into the fiberglass by the orca's brutal ramming, and David realized how close they had come to disaster because if the animal had continued even a minute longer, the boat might have taken on water and forced them into the sea with the predators still near. As they turned the damaged vessel back toward shore, the joy of the trip had been replaced by a lingering fear that would stay in their minds long after they reached safety. Experts later said territorial behavior or curiosity triggered the orca's calculated aggression, and boating groups reminded sailors that even the most intelligent apex predators can act unpredictably near human vessels, because the ocean belonged to them long before humans arrived to explore it. On April 18, 2024, the cold waters off South Africa's Western Cape carried the heavy tension of a coastline where life and death constantly collided beneath the surface. 46-year-old fisherman Luca Ferraro, who had moved years earlier from the Ligurian Sea to the shark-rich town of Gansby, believed this trip might be the difference between sinking into debt and finally catching enough to support his family, so he convinced his 17-year-old son Marco to join him for a final attempt in the deep channel near Dyer Island, where tuna, seals, and powerful predators ruled the currents. The morning air was crisp, the aluminum hull rattling with each wave, but hope stayed alive in Luca as he prepared the gear while Marco scanned the horizon, aware of his father's exhaustion and determination, and though the boat was small and aging, they pressed on because the sea had always been Luca's last gamble. Hours passed as gulls cried overhead and the swell rolled without mercy, yet the lines remained still, leaving Luca anxious while Marco tried to help, from coiling ropes to scanning the choppy surface for feeding fish. When the first strike came late that afternoon, it arrived with violent certainty, a powerful jerk that nearly sent Marco sprawling as the rod bent toward the water, the reel screaming as line burned away into the darkening sea. Luca's pulse surged as he held tight, believing the catch could be a large yellowfin tuna, valuable enough to change everything. Yet the weight behind the pull felt heavier, deeper, and far more relentless than a normal tuna. As Luca fought the line, the ocean churned in a wide circle around the boat, and the rising splash of a massive tail fin sent a surge of adrenaline through Marco, who stared in disbelief while his father braced against the gunwale, determined not to let go. But the sea suddenly went strangely still, and both father and son shared a glance filled with dread, because something enormous had taken interest in the struggling fish, and in Gansbai's deep channel there was only one creature powerful enough to change the rules so suddenly. The first strike was devastating, a massive body slamming into the hull with such force that the boat lurched sideways, sending gear airborne and knocking Marco off balance while Luca desperately tried to keep the line from tangling around them. A second hit arrived even harder, and the fiberglass shrieked as seawater sloshed violently over the sides. Luca realized a great white shark, likely drawn by the thrashing tuna, was hunting them now. Emboldened by the predator's instinct to dominate anything in its path, the third impact flipped the boat entirely, tossing father and son into the icy Atlantic as chaos swallowed them in an instant. Marco surfaced first, coughing and gasping as he reached for a floating cooler lid, and through stinging salt water he glimpsed his father kicking desperately, trying to reach him, but a massive dark shadow passed between them, a shape too large to comprehend in the fading light. Luca disappeared beneath the surface with a swirl of foam and pink-stained bubbles, leaving Marco frozen in shock, heart pounding, mind refusing to accept what his eyes had seen. Every second stretched like an eternity as he waited for his father to emerge again. The water remained empty except for rolling, disturbed waves and the overturned boat drifting silently. Time dragged, cold and relentless, yet Marco clung to the cooler lid, fighting exhaustion and the creeping terror that the shark might return, though the predator seemed satisfied with its victory, fading into the depths as darkness claimed the channel. Night swallowed Marco's hope piece by piece, and only the faint twinkle of distant shoreline lights reminded him that the world still existed beyond his nightmare. Yet every muscle in his body begged him to give up. He held on because surrender would mean letting the sea take them both, and he refused to let his father's final moments vanish into nothingness. When the sun rose, painting the horizon gold, a patrol vessel spotted Marco drifting near the channel, and crew members pulled the boy aboard, trembling and weak, wrapped in blankets, while the sea carried its secret downward where great whites ruled without consequence. Investigators later examined the damaged hull, noting deep gouges, puncture marks, and stress fractures that confirmed a shark of exceptional size had rammed the boat during a predatory event triggered by the hooked tuna. The tragedy sparked renewed warnings for small vessels operating near Dyer Island's deep waters, where some of the world's largest great whites hunted seals, fish, and anything that signaled weakness. Luca's body was never recovered and the ocean gave no answers, only silence and endless motion. But Marco continued to visit the harbor after school, sitting at the pier with memories of a father who had risked everything, and some locals said they saw him sail alone at dusk, drifting quietly beyond the break, yet never again with a line in the water, because some lessons written in blood were never forgotten. On August 15, 2020, 24-year-old Jake Simmons paddled out alone on a remote stretch of Western Australia's coast, where the beach was deserted, the sand unbroken by footprints, and the towering waves curled with a hypnotic rhythm that drew surfers seeking both adrenaline and solitude. He relished the silence and the raw power of the ocean echoing in the steady slap of water against his board as he balanced himself in the swell, feeling the familiar thrill of riding forces far greater than himself. The wind was mild, the morning sun low and harsh on the horizon, and the water, unusually still beneath the breaking waves, created an uneasy calm as if the ocean had paused to observe him. Jake adjusted his position, scanning the deep blue beyond the shallow foam where the waves formed perfect peaks for the ride he had been chasing since dawn. For hours he weaved between peaks, ducking under heavy swells, riding waves with the precision and instinct honed over years of solitary practice, his muscles aching, but his focus unbroken as he sought the tallest, most powerful waves, the ones that promised both risk and glory. The water beneath him felt deceptively tranquil, a smooth mirror reflecting sunlight and shadow, and Jake's mind wandered briefly to the countless times he had underestimated the ocean's temperament, a lesson always learned in bruises and scrapes. Yet he pushed those thoughts aside. chasing the rush that had drawn him far from the safety of populated beaches and the reassuring presence of friends. Then, without warning, the silence beneath him was broken by a shadow far larger than any seal or school of fish, moving with terrifying speed, the deep darkness sliding upward from the ocean's depths toward the sunlit surface. In that instant, Jake's instincts screamed danger even before his eyes could fully register it. A massive 14-foot tiger shark surged from the blue, its blunt head cutting cleanly through the water, and before he could react, it struck the edge of his board, clamping its powerful jaws with crushing force and thrashing violently, sending him tumbling into the churning surf as salt water slammed into his face and lungs. The first violent attack left him disoriented, the taste of brine and adrenaline burning together as he fought to resurface, every second stretching unbearably while the shark circled beneath, testing, watching, snapping again as though measuring his strength. The water around him became a chaotic blur of white foam and rolling waves, every movement amplified, every kick and paddle a desperate plea for survival against the sheer power of a predator, whose instincts were honed to perfection over years of hunting in these very waters. Jake could feel the vibration of its massive body beneath him, the energy of the ocean distorted by the predator's presence, and his heart thumped in wild, erratic beats as he struggled to maintain orientation and awareness, every fiber of his body engaged in the fight to stay alive. He paddled with all his strength, kicking furiously and gripping the board as tightly as possible, eyes locked on the dorsal fin slicing through the water with terrifying precision. The shadow of the shark always just beyond the turbulence, its size magnified by the shallow sunlight, refracting through the moving surface, reminding him that the ocean was no longer a playground but a predator's domain, where the balance between life and death was immediate, brutal, and unforgiving. Each wave that rose threatened to throw him off balance, and each breath he drew was a battle against the panic rising in his chest, while the shark circled with calculated patience, waiting for a sign of weakness, a momentary lapse that might end him. Time lost all meaning as minutes stretched into hours. Salt burned his eyes and lungs, his limbs screamed with exhaustion, yet he forced himself to stay calm, willing his muscles to obey. Slowly, methodically, he pushed toward shallower water where the waves broke in steady rhythm and the sand below promised brief safety. The shark shadowed him, circling and testing, its presence a constant pulse of danger. Jake knew that one wrong move could trigger another strike, one he might not survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shark retreated, slipping silently back into the depths as though it had completed its assessment, leaving the water around Jake calm once more, though his body still shook from shock and exertion, lungs burning, limbs trembling, and mind racing with the immediacy of what had just occurred. He paddled the last few meters to shallow water, feeling the resistance of the sand beneath his feet and the gentle support of the breaking waves, finally able to pull himself upright. Drenched in salt water, exhausted, and acutely aware of the narrow margin between survival and disaster, Jake collapsed onto the sand, chest heaving and heart pounding, every muscle trembling from the fight. He stared out at the waves that had, moments ago, been a scene of terror, now calm and deceptively peaceful. The same ocean that had nearly destroyed him shimmered with cruel beauty, a haunting contrast between serenity and danger. The encounter left him shaken, humbled, and profoundly aware of how quickly the sea could shift from playground to predator's domain. And even with years of experience and skill, he understood that the ocean's raw power could overwhelm preparation, turning a routine session into a test of survival. The beach remained empty except for his footprints, the broken rhythm of waves echoing his near-death experience. And Jake sat there for long minutes, letting the saltwater sting and the adrenaline fade while reflecting on the fragility of life in the presence of apex predators, knowing that even the strongest boards, fastest reflexes, and most practiced maneuvers could never fully eliminate the ocean's inherent unpredictability. The tiger shark had vanished into the deep blue, leaving no trace except the lingering fear, the pounding heart, and the vivid memory of a fight where survival had hung by a thread.